my name is Jeanette, and I want to thank you for joining me on the channel Jane Reads. So today I'm going to talk about the 6 books that I have finished so far in the month of December. And I'm really hoping the lighting is okay in this video because I've moved from my normal spot so that I can be in front of the tree. It just felt appropriate to talk about what I've read in December in front of our tree. And since we just set it up yesterday, let's take advantage of it. Okay, so I have finished 2 Christmas books, 2 romantic suspense books, a contemporary romance, and a legal fiction. So let's start with Christmas. So I read A Quilt for Christmas by Carlson. It's just a short little novella, and I wasn't really expecting to enjoy this one. I'm not a big Christmas reader to begin with, and Carlson is not one of my favorite authors for Christmas, and I also don't like novellas, so it kind of had a lot going against it. And I was told it felt very Hallmarky, so again, it had something going against it because I'm not a big fan of Hallmark type stories. But I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars, and we follow a retired lady named Vera who has moved to the town fairly recently to be closer to her daughter and her daughter's family. But shortly after she arrives, her daughter's husband gets transferred and they move out of town. So now she doesn't know anybody in town. The little girl from across the hall comes and knocks on her door and asks her for help for her mom. And so Vera goes and helps, and she gets to know this family. And through this little 4-year-old girl, she kind of starts to meet friends through a project that Fiona, making a quilt, wants her to do for her mom. And so when I say make friends, I mean adult friends. And we've just watched this friendship form between this group of ladies who don't really have a lot in common and probably wouldn't have even met if it wasn't for this situation. It was just really sweet, and I really enjoyed it. And there is a side romance that you kind of see happen. So that was kind of cool because not what you expected, or what I expected anyways. So yes, I do recommend this one. And then the other Christmas read was A Christmas Dream by Shanna Hatfield. This is book 1 of her Hudson House series. And in this series, you meet Brant Hudson, which is the main character in this book. And this one is set in Oregon in 1881. And so you meet Brant Hudson, and then the rest of the series follows kind of generations of the Hudsons. I haven't read any of the others yet. But so it starts with historical fiction, and then the 4th book is set in present day timeline. So that is really cool when you're following a generation of family. So I do definitely want to continue this series. In this one, Brant is very wealthy, and he is building a house in Silver Bluff, Oregon, and traveling from Portland to Silver Bluff by train, half a day's train journey, I don't know exactly how far would be, to build this house. And this house is huge. Everybody in the town kind of wants to see this house when it's done because they're watching it build and build up. And it's really interesting. And for being such a wealthy man who has a butler who is his best friend, they grew up together, they're working really close, and he can Brant can afford anything he wants. He needs to hire help for the house. He has servants, like housemaids, kitchen staff, things like that, right? And so he could come across very arrogant and not care about the little people or the people working for him, but he doesn't. He is very caring about everybody that works for him and wants the best for them and really takes care of them. Then you have Holland Drake, who meets Brant and doesn't know who he is at first, and meets him through her brother, who is a carpenter that's working on the library in this house. So that was really cool to kind of get a lot of the descriptions of the library. And Holland and her sister want a job as a housemaid in this place. They grew up on a farm, their parents aren't really wealthy, and so they're looking to work. And Holland and Brant meet. Holland doesn't know who Brant is. Brant knows who Holland is. And very quickly, so the first meeting, whatever, and then after that, Brant comes clean with Holland because he's been warned that Holland has a temper. And so there's really kind of some funny moments that happen, especially when Holland first realizes who he was and what he led her to believe. And we're just watching a relationship form between them. And it's kind of like, can it happen? Because he's very wealthy, so she's of a different class. But Brant's heart for the community and getting to know people and not care what people think. And I really enjoyed it. It was so sweet. And there are a number of characters in this because we've got Holland's whole family. So her sister, her brother, and a couple other siblings, her parents. And then we've got Brant and the butler and a couple other Brant's sister as well, and a couple other characters. And so there's just a lot of characters, but they're all like very nice to each other. And Brant's immediate sibling, his sister, does not come across as kind of a high class either, like really caring about those around her. Very different than their parents, who Brant is not really with, connection with. And so it's just really sweet to watch. So I really enjoyed watching the relationship grow and see how things developed. But then there's also side characters that it was like, ooh, there's a possible connection between those two, or a possible connection between those two. So I really want to continue the series. I know it's like kind of the next generation, but we will get answers about some of the other characters because there was a preview of the chapter 1 for book 2 in this book. And so after I read that, it was like, okay, there's a preview. Some questions are answered about what happened to certain characters. I loved this story. I gave it 5 stars. It was just so sweet. Then the contemporary romance I read, and that was Muskoka Blue, which is book number 6 of the original 6 hockey series by Carolyn Miller. And this one, we are following Dan, who is a hockey player who we have met as a side character in the previous books in this series. And so he is the main guy character. Then we've got Sarah, who is from Australia, currently staying in Muskoka, Ontario. So this was set in Ontario, which is really cool because that's where I live. And so she is staying with her aunt and uncle for the summer, or a number of months. She ends up not going back to Australia till January. And this starts May, June time. So Sarah has been through some events. She has lost her fiance through a tragic accident and a year and a half before we meet her. And she's still dealing with the grief and kind of the health challenges that she has. And she comes across as an ice princess to Dan when Dan first meets her. And Dan, because I knew Dan from the previous books, I was so excited to spend more time with him and get to know more about him. But for this one, there wasn't enough hockey for me. It takes place majority over the summer, so they're on break. And so he's staying in Muskoka at his place up there. So it just, I miss the hockey community. He does, as the season restarts, it does go, there is some hockey, but very, very little of it. It was much more romance focused and the relationship between the characters, which I did enjoy, but I wanted to see some of that hockey more. The guys do spend time with the online Bible study that we've got to know through the hockey players. So there is interaction with other players that we have met in previous books, and you get caught up on them. The one thing that really annoyed me a lot in this book is Dan calls Sarah princess all the time. And I know even just as a friend, right? And it's more of a nickname that he's given to her because of the way she comes across when he first met her. Not really an endearment thing, but it annoyed me. I don't like repetitive nicknames. I think I don't know, which is weird. Yeah, I don't know how to explain that. I did really enjoy the message in this story though, because Sarah is dealing with the grief and trying to turn to God and figure out, and Dan is like trying to help her with that. Like, so there's a big faith element in the story, and Sarah has come from a home of missionaries, and her aunt and uncle are running a church in Muskoka. And there is one scene that really touched me, and I don't know why it was so, I guess because of stuff that's happening like in my real life, it just was very profound to me. Is Sarah walks into the church that her aunt and uncle are leading and saw, oh, this is really dated. But then as she got to know people, it's like it was really caring about the people. It wasn't so much about the decor, it was about the people. And it was like, that is the importance of church, is you care about the people. And I loved that. I loved that message. And there is one point where Sarah kind of does something that really annoyed me. And it's part of that third act breakup thing that you see in a lot of books. But the way that it kind of transforms and changes, I did really enjoy. So I did give this 4 stars overall because I did enjoy it, and it was a nice kind of wrap up to the series. However, there was a couple things in it that were preview for the next series that follows, or I think the next 2 series that follows. And I think that's because I also know that she has the other series and what the titles of those books are. So then like there was a little hint to them in this book, and I was like, oh, so that character is going to be in that one. So that was kind of fun, like to spot, kind of almost like a title spotting in a book. It was a similar type of thing. So yeah. So then the 2 suspense books I read were Intervention and Vicious Cycle by Terri Blackstock. So Intervention is book 1 of the Intervention series, and Vicious Cycle is book 2. We are following the Covington family, which comprises of Barbara Covington, who is the mom who lost her husband 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was. And then Emily, who is 18, and Lance, who is 14 at the start of the series. Emily is hooked on drugs, and Barbara has been trying to do everything she can for Emily. Finally, she hires an interventionist and to take Emily to a rehab center. On the way to the rehab center, the interventionist gets killed and Emily disappears. What happens? So the police think that Emily was involved and very suspicious of it. And so Barbara arrives in Atlanta. Barbara and Lance go to Atlanta to try to find out what happened to Emily. And they're determined, no, she was not involved in this and she is mixed up. She didn't cause this to happen. And so then Barbara meets Kent, who is the detective, and you see Barbara's love for her kids, and she will do anything to get. My favorite character, though, of book 1 especially, was Lance, the 14-year-old boy. He is trying to help his mother. His mother is in distress and all over the place, and Lance is able to, no, let's do this. Oh, this is what you need to do. Really kind of keep her on track or help her kind of think it through. Like for a 14-year-old boy, he was pretty impressive. And so by the end of the book, we know what has happened and we know where Emily's life is going, like kind of what's the next step for Emily. Then they return home to Missouri, is where they're from. Then book 2 picks up a year later in Missouri, and Lance gets charged with kidnapping a baby from somebody he went to school with. They've had a baby and he ends up with it. But that girl, the mother, the baby's mom, has been involved in drugs as well. and just a very mixed up situation. Lance did not kidnap this baby, and so then they get pulled into this again. Emily is still dealing with her drug addiction and trying to come through rehab and get through it. Barbara reaches out to Kent for help, and Kent comes to town to help her, and like, I really enjoyed it. But there was moments that made me scared. And there was moments that I was so frustrated with a particular character. But the reality of it, like, it just felt so realistic of what drugs does to you, how it takes over your mind and your thinking, and kind of, you really, like, you want to do the right thing when you're sober, but then like the pull for drugs, and it's like, no, I need this, and your decisions, like, you're really torn. It just felt so realistic. Again, though, like, Lance is now 15 in this one, and I felt so bad for him and what he was going through and not understanding what was happening at certain points of the time. And he thought he was being punished, and it was actually there for his protection, but he didn't know that. I'm like, poor kid. And then, like, I really connected with Emily in this one as well, because you really get inside her head this time and get to know more what she's fighting with and dealing with and how she's going to overcome. Like, I cannot wait to move on to the next book in this series. It's the book I will be starting later today, because I just want to spend more time with this family and these characters. And I have high hopes that things like turn out well for them, because they have been through so much already. And there is a little bit of romance that happens between Kent and Barbara, and kind of what is going to go forward, because there's not a lot going for them. Like, they really have to fight through things and the struggles, like real life issues. These books were both 4 stars for me. They were very like heart-wrenching and very like, felt very, very real and scary, because like, we're dealing with a baby that, right, like, what's happening? Why do certain people want this baby when there's other ones that, you know, really care for the baby? Like, just evil that's happening. Okay, then the last book I finished is Guilty Until Innocent by Robert Whitlow. I had an advance reader copy of this one through NetGalley. It releases February the 4th. It is a legal thriller, and we are following Ryan, who works at a law firm. He's a young lawyer. Him and his wife have been married a few years, I would say. He has struggled with 2 previous law jobs. He ends up in town working for his uncle, Tom, and 26 years ago, Tom defended a client, or was the court-appointed lawyer for a client who was facing murder charges for a double murder. And the client ended up going to jail, and now the family has come 26 years later to try to, like, no, he's innocent, like, can we get him out on an MAR, which I know they said what it was, but now I cannot remember. Yeah. So we see Joe, who is the inmate, and there are scenes from him in the jail and kind of his life in the jail, doing his like garden work that he's doing, eating with friends. And Joe has become a Christian in jail, and he's witnessing to those around him. And you see like how God is helping these inmates. But there's a lot of kind of mundane stuff that happens in the jail. Like, you see a lot of the garden talk, going to the conference room to meet with a lawyer or call the lawyer, harmonica lessons between inmates, then the Bible study prayer meetings. Like, there's just a lot of scenes that take place in the jail that I just did not care about. But on the other hand, we've got Ryan, the young lawyer, and his wife, Paige, who are fairly new to town, and Paige works at home, so she doesn't really know very many people. She ends up meeting 3 ladies through the welcome wagon, which is really kind of cool. And they invite her to church, and so you see a friendship start to form there. And then there are challenges that Ryan and Paige are facing, but they work together and are open and honest to each other and a wonderful complement of each other. I loved them as a married couple and following them. I didn't really care about the case at all. And I mean, I know I should have cared about it more, but I just wanted to stay with them, especially Paige. And Paige is just coming to Christ and learning to trust God and then like there's other stuff, personal stuff going on in her life as well. I loved Paige. But because I didn't care about the inmate side of things, I just, every time it went back to the jail view, I was like, let's keep going. Let's move on to the next one. Let's get back to the couple. So I'm giving this book 3.5 stars. But I think that's a me thing. I just didn't want to deal with the inmate. I think other people will really enjoy this story. This was not my favorite Robert Whitlow. That's all I've got to say. Okay, so that is what I have read so far this month, and I'm hoping to read about the same for the second half of December. We'll see what happens. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video today, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.